You are listening to Pelle Tenebris Radio, a subsidiary of Fight the Lies Radio on the Cast 'Em Off Ministries Network. Welcome to Pelle Tenebris podcast. This is Kelly, and I'm very excited to have you here with me on my inaugural episode. In this one, I'm going to go into a little bit about my backstory, just a little bit, and talk about what I would like to do with this podcast and why I'm aiming it at the demographic that I have in mind. I've always been one of those people who wants to help others and to give encouragement and, help others feel better about themselves and to feel good. And since coming to the Lord many, many years ago, when I was about 7 or 8 years old, that desire has become a lot stronger. And especially after a lot of what I've been through in my life, I feel this calling on me to help those who are like me, and to let you know that you're not alone, that God does love you, that Jesus does love you, and that you don't have to exactly be a cookie cutter image of, what you see in churches. And to go into that, when I was growing up, there were certain movies that I liked and very much enjoyed. I always liked the Vincent Price movies. I had seen a couple of Bela Lugosi's movies, and I had enjoyed them. And of course, there was always Frankenstein and the old Phantom of the Opera movies. And Phantom of the Opera is one of my absolute favorite books and absolute favorite musicals. But I enjoyed these, and for a time, my mom, allowed it. She let us watch it. But when she really started getting serious about her faith, she started giving into a lot of what the other people in the church were telling her. You shouldn't watch these things because they're evil and they're very bad. And so she let that get to her. And so we stopped watching things like that. I grew up in the 80s, and I had a lot of the She-Ra toys and the Gem and the Holograms toys. And if any of you out there can remember the troll dolls that were so awesome, I had a slew of those. So she took all of these toys and things that I had, anything with unicorns on them too, and she threw them out and she burned them. Some of the things like posters or pictures or anything. And she said that they were of the devil. And I didn't understand what was going on here. I thought, there's nothing wrong with them. They're just kids' toys. It's just a bunch of innocent stuff. And this is in the 80s again. And that's when a lot of the panic about Satanism and rock music and so many other things really started coming to the forefronts of the church. And I remember, I confess that I used to listen to New Kids on the Block. I'm sorry, I didn't know any better. I'm joking. But there was a bonfire that was built at my church, and a lot of the kids, and purely in show, took their New Kids on the Block's cassette tapes and paraphernalia, anything that they had, and threw it into the fire, much like happened with the Beatles. And my mom and other kids tried to convince me to do this, and I just said, I don't want to do this. I don't want to have any part in this because it's just going to be a false front. I'm just going to be pretending to be one of them and say that I denounce this stuff when honestly, really, I like it and I don't want to do it. Thankfully, my mother agreed with me and she didn't push me to do it. But as for the other kids that did do it, they went right back to listening to New Kids on the Block. And growing up in this church, it was very charismatic. And a lot of the charismatic churches, we're talking like Church of God, Pentecostal Holiness, you would call them the holy roller types. And they're the ones where people are running in the aisles or out on the floor and they're just speaking in tongues, which I will be quite frank, I find to be nothing more than a lot of gibberish. And this place was very, very religious. And so it being religious, of course, there was a lot of legalism. And what legalism is a bunch of man-made rules that are they're extra biblical rules. And they are taken just as seriously and adhered to, if not more so, than the 10 Commandments are. And so there was, the way that a woman should dress, the way she should have her hair And this was kind of an unspoken rule in this church. And if you understand the phrase or are familiar with the phrase Church of God lady hair, we're talking Tammy Faye Baker hair and makeup and clothes and everything, pretty much what she looked like. And my mom fell into this, and having short and very fine hair, she was not able to achieve Marge Simpson heights with her hair, but she certainly tried. And again, this is in the 80s, so of course big hair was all the rage. So we had to dress a certain way in going to this church, and we had to look a certain way. We had to act a certain way. With legalism, there were other rules, such as you can't listen to any secular music. You cannot watch secular TV shows. There are very few movies that you're allowed to watch. The majority of them were probably Disney movies that were completely acceptable. And sometimes watching a PG-13 movie or just a PG movie was absolutely fine and would be overlooked. But on the whole, participating in any secular activities was pretty much forbidden. And so if you broke any of these rules, and other churches have them too, men cannot shave their beards, women can't cut their hair, they can only wear dresses, no nail polish, things like that. The legalism really gets into you, and it goes completely hand in hand with religion. They're almost one and the same. And so it's very difficult to be an individual and to let your individuality shine when you're going to a place like that. I had to keep it down deep inside myself to hide the fact that I enjoyed watching these movies that people thought were evil, although I fail to see how the movie Frankenstein can be evil, and I'm talking about the one with Boris Karloff. I failed to see how it was evil, how Phantom of the Opera was evil, how any of these things were evil unless they had completely occultic overtones in them and were just blatant, in your face. So I went along and I agreed with my mom, because that's what a good little girl did. And my mom wanted to raise me to be a lady, and her definition of a lady was to wear cute little dresses. And I'm talking like, oh, isn't she adorable kind of dresses. And when I grew up, I would continue to wear dresses. I would continue to wear very nice jewelry, have my makeup on, just look perfect, and be a home wife, a housewife. Cook, clean, do the laundry, the whole 9 yards, that kind of thing. And I was a tomboy. What I liked doing was playing outside, climbing trees, getting in the dirt, just running around and having a good time. And if I wasn't doing that, then I was in my room reading, which thankfully my mom did not so much mind. But as time passed, I started to find that I enjoyed wearing black and that I preferred wearing black to wearing other colors. And I think the reason was that I just felt safe in it. I felt like it was this nice, calm color. It suited me, and I would, get some accessories. I had a vest and a belt and a bracelet that one of my grandmothers had given me, and I would wear it with that. And actually, it looked really good for a 12-year-old, and I enjoyed wearing it. And I would find, I'm okay with color as long as it's in some sort of accessory to black, whether it's, earrings or a headband, a belt, my nail polish or anything like that. And in the 80s, when all that stuff was just so rife, and, bands like Twisted Sister were being blasted as devil worshippers, and, there was a whole thing behind KISS, meaning Kings in Satan's Service, or AC/DC, meaning Antichrist, Death's Child, all that. Wearing black was synonymous with Satanism. It was synonymous with the bad guys, the bad things, with the devil, the whole 9 yards. And so, me not understanding, I looked at my mom and said, "Does it make me a Satanist that I wear all black?" And she just laughed and pretty much said, if you don't feel like you're comfortable wearing black all the time, if you don't feel like you should, then don't do it. And that was good advice. It was well-meaning advice. But what I would have said to my younger self was, no, it does not mean that you're a Satanist. It means that you like wearing the color black. And if it makes you happy and if you're comfortable wearing it, then by all means wear it. And if people think that you're a Satanist, well, that's their problem. All you have to do is just explain to them, this is the color that I prefer to wear, and I'm not a Satanist, I can assure you. So I made the decision then and there, I'm just going to stop wearing black. And time went on, and instead of wearing black all the time, I said, well, maybe just occasionally is going to be fine. And I had this really pretty velvet 2-piece, almost suit, but was a skirt suit that I really loved to wear. And I would wear a colored blouse underneath it just for that little bit of color. And I loved that outfit. I almost still wish that I had it. I never thought I would say that, but, for 1993, it was pretty fashionable. And so I would wear it for very special occasions. And I still had to wear dresses, even though I hate them. I hated them then. I still hate them now. I wish I didn't, but I do. I think there's something of the tomboy that still remains in me that refuses to put on a dress and be constrained. So time went on. We had ended up leaving the church that had all the legalism in it and going into a smaller one that was Pentecostal Holiness Church in the little place in Virginia called Pulaski County. It was actually in Pulaski itself. And I loved this church, and Mom did too. The pastor and his wife, we all became close, and they ended up becoming my godparents. Now, when I was 14 years old, tragedy struck. About 3 days before, my mother had a brain aneurysm, and she was in a coma. And I go into a lot of detail with this in my testimony, which I will link you to. For 3 days, and because of this religion and because of legalism, and because of the word of faith teachings that had come out and would start gaining momentum, word of faith is where you basically try to speak good things into your life, such as health or wealth, healing, things like that. And God is treated as if he is some kind of vending machine. And, we just pop the prayer in and the miracles come out, but that's not how it works exactly. We pray and he does answer, but he doesn't always answer in the way that we want him to or the way that we expect him to. And so the word of faith, being taught this and growing up to believe that this is how things should be, made for a very shaky foundation for my faith. So I spent 3 days, as my mom was in a coma, I spent 3 days either in the chapel of the hospital or in my room at my grandparents' house, crying, pleading, begging God to save my mother's life. And when she died on my 14th birthday, I was devastated, absolutely devastated. It hurt so much. And so I was fed up. I was fed up with God. I had such hopes that, a miracle would happen and that my mother would be okay, that she would come out of this completely healed and not feeling any effects of having that brain aneurysm or lost part of her, I guess, any part of her brain activity or anything. But she died. She left us. And I was angry with her and I was angry with God that all of this had happened. And I didn't understand why. And I turned my back on God. I said, I hate you. This is coming from somebody who had received Christ when she was 7 or 8 years old. I just, God, I hate you. You disappointed me. You let me down. I just leave me alone. I don't want anything to do with you anymore. And so time went on and I got into the occult. It started with me reading books by Edgar Cayce because I'd always had an interest in, psychic phenomena. I have had several over the course of my life, more than my share of strange supernatural experiences, and I wanted to find out, where does it come from? What is it exactly? Is this really is a ghost really the spirit of a former living human being, or is it something else? Why do we have dreams that predict the future? Why do people know certain things? And the answers that I was getting from my mother and from the church, because the Bible said so or because God said so, never satisfied me. I needed answers. And so I started looking into these books that I was reading for all the answers. And when I was in high school, in my senior year, I became friends with a young man who was in a coven of witches. I was invited to join the coven, which I did, and I eventually became the high priestess of this coven. And I did a lot of things. There was transcendental meditation, there was astral projection, there was just a whole slew of things, casting spells, cursing the people that I didn't like, especially Christians, and cursing churches, and all this stuff. And as it progressed, I started experiencing very severe sleep paralysis. And somehow I just knew this was coming from what I was doing in this coven, and that it had to stop. And if it didn't stop, then things would just get so much worse. And I was still, through all of this, my grandparents didn't know. I put on a very good mask of being a good Christian and continued to go to church with them until I was given, I think around 16 or 17 years old, the decision to whether or not if you want to keep going, then go. If you don't, then don't. And so I would go sporadically and ended up stopping completely. But nevertheless, their church, which was a Methodist church, gave me a beautiful gift for my graduation from high school. And it was a little gold cross necklace. And when I opened up that little box and I saw that necklace, I just started crying. And I knew what I needed to do. And what I needed to do was get out of that coven and get out of doing all this as fast as possible. And it scared me. It terrified me. I didn't want there to be any awful backlash. I didn't know what to do because they all hated Christians, as I thought I did. And well, if they find out that I'm leaving them because of this, then what's going to happen to me? But I did it, and I didn't have anybody to be there with me when I left. I did not have anyone that I could turn to for spiritual advice, and that was difficult for me. But I made it through. And so here I am today, having gone through, more in that period of time. But I'm just gonna leave it at that for now. I was interviewed by Brandon Schwinn of Custom Off Ministries, who has graciously asked my husband and I to join his ministry team, and we have a podcast together, and then I have my own podcast. And if you want to hear my testimony, you can just go to customoffministries.com and check it out. So progressing on to this, it has been on my heart for quite some time. I don't know how many years, at least 10 or 11 years, that I want to reach out to the Goth community. I want to reach out to the people who, they don't look like everyone else. And I'm talking, not only the goths, but punks, metalheads, emos, all these subcultures. And I want to reach out to them and to let them know that, we love you, and to encourage them and to let them know, not all Christians hate the way you look or hate your lifestyle or anything. We just, we want to love you, and we want you to allow us to do that. And the reason for this is that I finally gave in. I was, I think, 18 years old when I said, you know what? I don't care what anybody says. I'm going to wear black. I'm going to wear all black, and I'm going to wear nothing but black. And I had heard about the goth subculture through a friend of mine, and did my research on it and just became very, enamored with it. And I thought, man, here is a place I'm really sure that, I can fit in here. This is great. I love the clothes. Wearing all black is just a big bonus. I loved the clothes. I loved the music. I loved the hair, everything about it. It's not just the aesthetics, but sometimes it feels like being goth is something that is inside of us, and it's something that's a part of us, because we just gravitate towards the strange and the unusual, and there's nothing in the world wrong with that. When I mentioned to all my friends, the people that I meet that are new, I'm a goth. I love creepy and spooky things. I absolutely love horror movies. Not the ones with copious amounts of blood, because I become very ill at the sight of blood, but the ones where there's a monster in the place and you can't see it, but it is after you. It could be anywhere. You don't know what it looks like. And there's just so much tension and suspense built up. And then you put some well-timed jump scares in there. I'm hooked. I love that kind of thing. And I have for such a long time, I have loved anything that's strange and unusual and out of the ordinary. Growing up in the Bible Belt in Virginia, you didn't see a lot of people who had tattoos and very few people who had their nose pierced. I loved it. I thought, man, this is so great that you can put artwork on your body. And my mother completely hated that I was in with these trashy people, talking to them about, as a small child, just talking to them about their tattoos and how much I loved them and where did you get it? Did it hurt? What does it mean to you? And when I was 6 years old, I determined that when I'm 18, I'm going to do two things. I'm going to get my first tattoo, and I'm going to dye my hair pink. And the latter was influenced by Gemma and the Holograms, which is still one of my favorite cartoons. I will forever be a fan. And I did just that when I turned 18 on my 18th birthday. I got my first tattoo, and I have since gotten a few more. I did dye my hair pink, and my family my grandparents, they had become my legal guardians after Mom passed away. My grandfather put up with it, bless his heart. My uncle and aunt just about lost it. I know that they didn't like it. And, I can understand, that all of them wanted what was best for me. But I really needed to be true to myself. And I've gotten a lot of flack for doing that. I've gotten a lot of flack for, liking, having, little collectible things in my life, like skulls, fairies, dragons, things like that I enjoy. I love Dracula. I love the book so very much. It's one of my absolute favorites. I love Anne Rice's Vampire Chronicle books. And so I read a lot of books like this, some horror if it's well written. And, I have a little wooden coffin that I found at a craft store, and I brought him home and I painted him black and I named him Vladislav. So I have things like that in my house, and I have received so much. I don't know, in how to word, the reactions, but they were terrible. Just some people just hating it and telling me I'm going to hell. Other Christians telling me that I'm going to hell for having tattoos and piercings, and, for listening to some of the music that I listen to, for all this stuff. And I just look at them and I say, you've got it wrong. And it's not your place to tell me that I'm going to hell just for having tattoos and piercings. That's not why I would go to hell. You don't need to be saying that to me. And I don't believe that the church in general needs to turn away the people that show up on their doorsteps and that show up in their sanctuaries that are coming looking for God. They don't need to turn them away, because it's, we've already created enough of a bad name for ourselves, because there are just the weirdos out there, the rogues, I guess you could call them, who think it's their duty to go and murder people at an abortion clinic, who think it's their duty to scream at the lost and unsaved that they're going to go to hell, and try to bully them into becoming a Christian. I don't agree with that. I think we should lead by example. I think we should lead by an example of love and compassion and caring and understanding and empathy. And those people are the outliers. They are not us. They are not Christians. They are people who carry the title of Christian, but they are not, especially because they so go against what Jesus taught us in the New Testament. And I want to open my arms out to these subcultures, to the goth community, to the punks, to everyone, and say, you know what? You can be a Christian, but you do not have to stop wearing those clothes. You do not have to stop listening to that music. You don't have to stop everything immediately. And I will most certainly not force you to change your appearance to fit that, fit what I think should be. Now, when you accept Christ into your life, when you are saved, God changes you. And it's a continual change. It is a change that lasts a lifetime. It's always ongoing. You're not going to some people immediately, if they're, drug addicts, or if they smoke, or if they're alcoholics, some people will immediately just quit that stuff, and others won't. We're not the same. Not all are the same. But there is a way to, reconcile being a goth and being a Christian. And if you're listening to this and you don't know what the goth subculture is, it's a culture that originated between 1979 and 1984. The Goths were originally, it comes from that Germanic tribe that was originally regarded as barbaric by the Romans. And it was also, there's the Gothic architecture, but Goth, the subculture, originated, around the 80s. And what happened, it came from punk. And the early Goths, they dressed similar to punks, black being the preferred color for their hair and the clothing. Sometimes there was red or white or purple. They preferred to wear silver jewelry. The makeup, white foundation with lots of black eyeliner, and it was sported by both men and women. There was a lot of fishnet. There still is. Fishnet is awesome. The hairstyles started out as a mohawk, but it was wider and the hair was definitely bigger. And it's just evolved to now where people, will have their hair down. They might have it done up elaborately. They might wear synthetic dreads, or they might have their hair in actual dreadlocks. It just depends. There's different types of goths. There's cyber goth, Victorian goth, traditional goth, which they dress more like they did back in the 80s. There's a pastel goth. There's so many different types of goth. And I guess you could call them like almost a subculture. They're in their groups. Each have their own music preferences. They have the clothing styles that they like. But what unites all of us is that we are part of the Gothic subculture. We like spooky things. We think bats are adorable. And this doesn't really necessarily go for all. But in general, if you look like a goth and you like goth things like the music and the nice spooky and creepy things, then it's kind of generally agreed that you are a goth. Now, if you're a goth and you like going to the beach like I do, I love going to the beach in summertime. If you listen to non-goth music, if you like to listen to 80s pop music or 90s pop music or current pop music, if you don't like bats, if you love puppies and kittens and the color of pink, that doesn't make you any less goth. It just means that you're an individual with your own personal tastes, your own likes and dislikes, and there's nothing wrong with that. And there's a problem with elitism in the goth community, but there's always going to be elitists, no matter what culture or group that you see in America. And so that was just to kind of give you a little bit of background information on the Gothic subculture. And the music itself grew out of punk. It was later somewhat influenced by industrial. And so now goth music does incorporate electronic sounds in the music. And there are different goth bands that you can find on Google. My personal favorite is The Cure. I love them. But, you can, of course, get on Google and just look up these different bands, these different artists, and, find something that suits your own personal taste. And I grew up in a small town, and when I embraced this gothness about me, I embraced everything. It was a little bit of interesting. And so I had to do a lot of searching and looking, and there was a lot of trial and error in everything that I did and the way I did my makeup, or sometimes, the clothes that I wore. And back then I was a blonde. I'm a blonde again now. And to me, it just looked so weird for me being a blonde and being a goth, but I didn't care. And that's another thing, as tattoos and piercings have gotten more popular and have become more mainstream and more socially acceptable, so has different hair color, such as pink or green or blue or a rainbow or whatever you want to do with your hair, whatever style you want it in, whatever color you want it in. And that makes me happy because I see the things that I have always loved gaining popularity and becoming acceptable in the workplace. That's a huge step for me that I see as a huge, huge step, because it's really wonderful to be able to embrace your individuality like that. Now goth is a dark aesthetic. It is, I think, what a lot of us are drawn to. We're drawn to the darkness, aesthetically, and it's not necessarily a darkness that relates to evil, but some of us find comfort in that darkness. And I guess in some of these places that, we would go to, and I know it sounds kind of weird, but I don't mind going to cemeteries. It doesn't creep me out or anything, but I think places like that are lovely. I think they're beautiful. I think there are certain places, certain buildings, structures that are dilapidated and old and broken down and run down. To me, they're beautiful because they've got such a story to tell. And it might seem a little bit unusual that I like that, but how do I reconcile this, which people would associate with death? How do I reconcile that with being a Christian? This is how I do it. I know where my limits are. Having been in the occult and experiencing all that stuff, I'm really careful. I don't have anything that's shaped or patterned after, a Ouija board, because I don't like that. I don't like that kind of thing. There are certain movies that I won't watch. There's certain music that I won't listen to. I'm very careful about the music that I do listen to because I'm more concerned about the lyric content in it. And so I won't listen to anything that's got a whole bunch of swearing in it. I know what my limit is, and I don't let those things get in the way of my walk with Christ, because I believe that if I should just let myself slip even just a little bit, I'm going to go back to where I was. And I'm going to go into a territory that I don't want to go into. And not talking about, slipping and going back into the occult. I know I'm not going to do that because I really learned my lesson. But I'm talking about, for a long time, I've had a problem with swearing and cussing. And I've been working to stop doing that. And admittedly, sometimes the occasional swear word slips out. So if I listen to, let's say if I listen to music with a lot of swearing in it, I'm probably going to kind of slide back into that habit. And, it may be a forever thorn in my side, but I know my limits and I know my limitations. And I don't allow any of this to get in the way of my walk with Christ. And actually, I feel that in being a Christian goth, I have the best of both worlds. I have the light. And even though I like the darkness, I can bring that light with me into the darkness. And that's what I, definitely hope to do, is to go into what you could call the dark places. And by that, I mean places where there are people who are down and out and just unhappy and with themselves or with their situation or anything that's going on. And I can go and I can let the light of Jesus shine through me to these people so that they can see it, and so that their dark places, their darkness will be dispelled, and that they will see, that there is hope, and that there is a way for them to live a good, full life. And, not saying that being a Christian is all hunky-dory, not saying that it's candy and roses. There's difficulties. It's life. And there's always going to be difficulty in life. But however, we have been transformed by the power of our Messiah. And he has done so much for us. And biggest one is forgiveness. We've been forgiven for everything that we have ever done and everything that we are going to do. And for people to realize that there is someone so great and powerful who absolutely loves them, for them to know that, we have to show them that. We have to be that love. We have to be that love of God. Because if we just go around condemning people and telling them they're going to hell, that's not love. That's not showing them love. We have to be willing to extend our hands out and to say, let me tell you my story. Let me tell you what I have been going through. I understand where you're from. I understand. I have been here. I have been there. I want to help. And, without any pretense or anything, without trying to get more people into a church, anything like that, we really need to love, and we need to show God's love to those around us. And that's what I want to do in my life and through this podcast, and letting people know that if you're a Christian and you like to listen to heavy metal, that's fine. If you're a goth and a Christian, it's fine. If you are emo and a Christian, it's fine. If you're a punk and you're a Christian, it's fine. If you like certain music or certain styles of clothing or certain movies, things like that, it's absolutely fine that you like that. Becoming a Christian doesn't mean that you have to give up too many things. You have to give up sin. And at first it's difficult. I want to say it gets so much easier. And there are times that temptation is going to arise, but because you're a goth or a punk or whatever, and you're a Christian, doesn't mean that those two cannot coincide. It doesn't mean that they cannot live together. They can. You just need to know your limitations, your own limitations, and what your limitations are not going to be the limitations of others. I really can't stand watching movies that have really hugely occultic tones in them because they bother me. And there's just something about them that makes me feel uneasy, so I stay away from those. There are some bands, that I once liked, and I can't listen to them anymore because I feel a little bit of a disturbance in the force when I listen to them. But, no matter what you look like, it doesn't matter. It's what is in your heart that matters the most. And I'm going to tell you that Jesus is not going to condemn you because that's, he didn't come into the world to do that. John 3:17, everybody's familiar with John 3:16, for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, so that whomever believes in him shall not perish but have everlasting life. But the very next verse, for God did not send the Son into the world to judge the world, but that the world might be saved through him. And I find a lot of the time now the word judge is being thrown around. It's don't judge me for this, don't judge me for that. Don't judge me for liking the Backstreet Boys. Don't judge me for watching this thing. Don't judge me for eating this. Don't judge me for drinking this. Don't judge me for being the way that I am. I think the word has lost its impact in being used so much. But the thing is that Jesus didn't come to condemn us. He didn't come to smack all his naughty children and tell us what a bad job we've done. He came to save our lives, to literally save our lives. And it means an eternity with him as opposed to spending an eternity without him. That's what hell to me is. It's an eternity without the presence of God. It's an eternity without Jesus, and I do not want that. And so there's these pastors here who are going, I shouldn't even just aim at this at pastors, but there are pastors and there are Christians who are going outside and there are just, maybe they mean well, but they're yelling at people, they're badgering them, they're literally trying to beat them down and into becoming a Christian. And people are just going to say, okay, I'll do it. But they're not going to mean that. That's something we need to stop doing. And we need to remember that God did not send the Son into the world to judge the world or to condemn the world, but that the world through him would be saved. And that's the main theme. That is a lot of importance in this. And that is something that I'm striving for, to not condemn people, but to show God's love to them in everything that I do and all the words that I speak. And in the topics that I'm going to be covering in the future, I know that it's going to sound like I'm coming across as condemning these people and judging them and being harsh on them. But the truth of the matter is there are a lot of things that I've seen happening in the church, and I don't want to be there, and it should not be there. And it's something that's very detrimental to the lives of the people who are going to these churches. And it's something that I feel very strongly needs to stop, but I will be covering that later. And so if you are a Goth, if you are a Christian Goth, how do you respond to people who have this knee-jerk reaction and they look at you and they're like, oh my gosh, you're evil? Well, you can sit with them and you can have a good conversation with them. And we tend to make a snap judgment whenever we see somebody's appearance. And if it doesn't match up with what we like, then of course that opinion is going to be very negative. You cannot get to know somebody just by the way that they look. You could have one of the most evil, foul-looking people in the world and could be just as sweet as sugar. And likewise, you could have someone who is beautiful and is just the image of perfection, but is just absolutely an awful person, just a terrible personality, rude, cruel, nasty, and mean. So just sit down with these people and look at them, smile at them, say God bless you to them. Don't react out of anger, don't react out of hatred, but love them and let them see by your actions the kind of person that you really are. That's really the only way to get through to people, is to let your actions and your words walk together. Walk the walk, talk the talk. Instead of saying one thing and doing something else, you can say and do the same things and make a greater impact on the lives of those around you than you would if you were being an absolute, complete hypocrite. And I think I'm going to go ahead and draw this podcast to a close. I just want to say again, thank you for joining me in this inaugural podcast episode. And I hope you will join me for the future ones. I really want to thank Brandon Schwinn for asking my husband and I to become part of Cast Him Off Ministry. And he has been doing just such an absolutely fantastic job. And we see the Lord working through him. And that's giving us so much encouragement. And we hope that what we do will be for the glorification of God, that will always bring him glory, because we're just his instruments. We're just the ones who are going out and doing his will and trying to be an encouragement to everyone that we meet, and just love others and really bring the truth out into the light. And if you want, you can check out our podcast. It's called Fight the Lies Podcast. It's also a part of the Cast Him Off Ministries network. And again, I would like to thank you for joining me today. I hope you all have a very, very blessed day. Pelle Tenebris Radio is a production of Fight the Lies Ministries. Visit us at ftlradio.net. This program is released under Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial No Derivatives 4.0 International License. Intro and outro music by Kevin MacLeod at incompetech.com.